2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Well, folks, it finally happened. The moment we thought we'd never get has finally come. Congress has voted to release the Epstein Files, and Donald Trump has signed the bill into law. But that leaves the question, what happens now? What does this actually mean, and could this finally be what buries Trump? The short answer is yes, this could be what buries Trump, but not for the reasons that you might think. For reasons I'll explain in this video, we are probably not going to see the actual Epstein Files anytime soon. Trump's people are preparing for a long legal battle to make sure that this doesn't happen for as long as Trump is president. The good news is that this might not be enough to save them. The Trump administration has put themselves in a position where every path forward is a bad one, and there is no clean exit from the story. They can no longer protect Trump while also satisfying their base and keeping their own party united. Right now, Trump and the Republicans are in the weakest positions they've been in a long time, and we on the progressive left have a big opportunity and responsibility to capitalize on this moment. So here's what I'm going to do in this video. First, I'm going to go over what these Epstein Files actually are, and what is expected to be in them. I'm going to go over how Congress was able to pass this bill even though Donald Trump and Republican leadership tried to stop it, because this explains the current Republican civil war we're watching unfold. Then I'm going to explain the legal tricks and tactics that the Trump administration is now using to make sure that we don't actually get to see the Epstein Files anytime soon. And I'm also going to explain why this isn't going to save Trump. Then I'm going to explain why this bill and the way it got passed could be the beginning of the end for Trump, even if we never see the files. I'm going to explain the talking points that the right wing is going to use to try and defend Trump and distract us from this issue, and why they're not going to work. Then I'm going to explain what we on the left should be doing in this moment, and what we need to look out for going forward, because the passage of this bill isn't the end of the story. It's only the beginning of a new one that could be the end of MAGA, and the beginning of something even worse. So let's begin. So first of all, what exactly are the Epstein Files? What did Congress just vote to release? The Epstein Files that Congress voted to release are the raw criminal case files that the FBI and DOJ seized when they raided Epstein's estates, and the bill, called the Epstein Files Transparency Act, mandates that the DOJ and FBI release the information they have on Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, including flight logs and travel records, which individuals and institutions were connected to Epstein's criminal activity, and internal communications that the DOJ had about Jeffrey Epstein's plea deal in 2008. For those of you who don't know, in 2007, Jeffrey Epstein had already been arrested for his trafficking crimes. The FBI had built a large federal case against him. Epstein was facing down a life sentence, until the Department of Justice suddenly signed a non-prosecution agreement with Epstein, which gave him and potential co-conspirators immunity from federal charges. As a result, Epstein only did 13 months in county jail, during which he was allowed to leave the jail 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. Do you want to know who was in charge of this deal? That would be Alexander Acosta, the U.S. attorney who was in charge of the case, a Republican who Trump later appointed to be his Secretary of Labor. Now, we don't know exactly why Acosta and the DOJ gave Epstein a deal like this. We don't know what their internal communications were, who demanded what, how they came to this decision, or who proposed the deal, but this information is in the files. All this to say, we don't know exactly what the files contain, but we do know what kind of files this bill is trying to make public. So let's talk about the bill itself. How did this vote happen, and why did it take this long? It's important to go over this, because the story of how this bill got passed gives crucial context into how hard Trump and Republican leadership tried to stop this moment from happening. Remember that Trump himself campaigned on releasing the Epstein Files, and Pam Bondi, the head of the DOJ that Trump himself appointed, bragged on TV that she had Epstein's client list sitting on her desk ready to review.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
But despite this, in July, the DOJ suddenly announced that there was no client list, and that no one else has been implicated in the Epstein Files, and that there was no reason to investigate further. Both the left and right didn't like this at all, and this memo is what led the Democratic Representative Ro Khanna and Republican Representative Thomas Massie to team up the next week and introduce the bill that was passed. Now, to understand why it took so long to pass this bill, you need to know that in the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House needs to agree to allow the bill to go to the floor to even get a vote. In this case, the Speaker is Mike Johnson, a Trump loyalist who refused to allow the bill to even have a vote. But there is a way that Congress can get around the Speaker of the House, called a discharge petition. If House representatives can get 218 signatures on a petition, literally on a piece of paper, they can ignore the Speaker of the House and put the bill to a vote without him. All 213 Democrats signed the petition. Only 4 Republicans signed it, leaving them at 217 votes. Meanwhile, Democrat Adelita Grijalva was elected to be a representative in Arizona, and she was planning to be the final signature needed on the petition. This scared the hell out of Mike Johnson, who pulled out every trick in the book to delay swearing her in. Finally, after the government shutdown ended, Grijalva was sworn in as a U.S. representative, 50 days after she was elected, and the first thing she did after being sworn in was sign the petition, bringing the bill to the floor for a vote. It was at this point that Trump began publicly lashing out at the Republicans that allowed this moment to happen, in particular Marjorie Taylor Greene, who Trump explicitly unendorsed for her re-election. But at the end of the day, the rest of the Republicans in the House of Representatives were now in a position to choose between their loyalty to Trump or having their names be written down in history as having voted against releasing the Epstein Files, and all but one of them voted to release the Epstein Files. Then, just after, the bill was passed unanimously in the Senate, sending it straight to the president's desk to be signed by Donald Trump. So, the vote went through, the bill has been signed. That leaves the question, what's going to happen now? Well, I have good news and bad news, and I'm a bad news first kind of guy, so let me get to that first. But there is good news, so stay tuned for that. First of all, if you were a person who thought that this vote would lead to us in the public actually getting the Epstein Files, prepare to be disappointed. The fact is that we are probably not going to see the Epstein Files for ourselves for the foreseeable future, or for as long as Trump is in power. Let me explain why. You see, Trump and his administration have a trick up their sleeve. They saw this coming, and just days before the vote, Pam Bondi announced a major new investigation into Epstein's network, where she named Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, and Reid Hoffman as being under investigation, all 3 of whom are conveniently either Democrats or Democrat-aligned. Trump later added that the bank JP Chase was included. Let me remind you that Bondi's own DOJ announced earlier that the files had nothing in them that warranted further investigation. So this is yet another flip-flop from the Trump administration. Now, when this was announced, a lot of people could see that this was obviously a distraction. It was just a flailing attempt to throw some shade at Democrats and give the MAGA base something to chew on. But this investigation is actually more strategic than that. Trump is actually getting ready to use the exact same strategy that has worked for him for years, both before and after becoming president, which is using the legal system to delay accountability for as long as possible and run down the clock. Let me explain. You see, the bill that was just passed has a clause in it that allows for a few types of information to be unreleased. This includes abusive material involving Epstein's victims, and it also allows the DOJ to withhold information that would jeopardize an active federal investigation. This is the loophole that Trump and his DOJ under Pam Bondi are trying to exploit. By opening up a new investigation, they get to withhold any document that they say is important to the investigation. And remember how JP Chase was named? This allows the investigation to be incredibly broad as Trump wants it to be. It can involve any and all information that involves some exchange of money or financial information at any point, which can be a lot of things. Now, the text of the bill does say that the redactions must be temporary, and the DOJ must report which categories of information that they're withholding, and that redactions cannot be made because of political sensitivity. But who decides if the redactions are temporary? The DOJ is free to keep the investigation going for as long as Trump is in office. Even if the information is released in 10 years, it's still technically temporary. And who reports the categories of information withheld? Trump's DOJ does. And what happens if Congress decides that Trump's DOJ is purposefully hiding information to protect him? Well, Congress could issue a subpoena for the redacted files, but then Pam Bondi could refuse to do so for any made-up reason. Then Congress could vote to hold Pam Bondi in contempt of Congress, and good luck getting the Republicans to do that. Then Congress could sue Pam Bondi, but even if they do this, Trump's DOJ could file a motion to dismiss the case, and when a judge rules against the motion, Trump can appeal to the DC Circuit Court. If they rule against him, he can appeal to the Supreme Court, which is stacked with Republicans and can choose how long they want to wait before they take a case. This process could take years, long enough for Trump to be finished with his term or even with life itself. That's why we're not going to see the files anytime soon. Instead, I'm expecting Trump to have Pam Bondi wrap up any files that look bad for him under the cover of an active investigation, all while they selectively release any and all files that make Democrats look bad with constant press releases trying to control the narrative. Okay, so that all sounds really disappointing, but before you get all doomer on me, I promised you good news, and there actually is a lot of good news, so what is it? So first of all, I want to say that back when this became an issue in July, there was a big part of me that believed that Trump was going to find a way to wiggle out of all of this, just like he was able to do with literally everything else. And while I still think that he's not going to face formal legal consequences, I now think that what's happening now is enough to finish Trump off politically, even if we never see the files during his lifetime. Let me explain. Many of you know that a few days before the vote took place, Trump suddenly did a complete reversal on whether or not he supported releasing the Epstein Files. After months of calling them a Democratic hoax, of telling Republicans privately and publicly to not release them, Trump suddenly announced that Republicans should vote to release the files, and that they have nothing to hide. Now, you're a fool if you believe that Trump had a genuine change of heart or really believes that there's nothing incriminating about him in the files. But we need to take a moment and go over what's happening here because this is actually an enormous loss for Trump. The only reason why Trump would do this is if he became convinced that a large number of Republicans were about to vote yes on releasing the files and that there was no longer anything he could do to stop it. Trump had no choice but to flip. Think about what it would have looked like if he didn't. If Trump was still publicly against releasing the files, but over 100 Republicans voted to release them anyway, as Thomas Massie predicted, then the news story would not only be about the files, the news story would have been about the Republican uprising against Trump, about Trump losing control over his own party, of no longer being the big man in charge. And we know that there is no way Trump could let that happen. Take a moment to realize what actually happened here. This is the first time in Trump's political career where he no longer had control, where his moves were being dictated by the people he had always controlled up until now. He had his hand forced by people who wouldn't obey him anymore. You better believe that this is eating away at Trump, and this is very likely the first sign of Trump losing control of his party for good. Trump's reversal was also a signal that he and his administration have given up on the possibility of blocking the files release in Congress, and that their strategy has now shifted towards where they think they have the best chance of winning: the courts and the court of public opinion. That's the point of this new active investigation that Pam Bondi initiated. I believe that Trump's strategy going forward is to keep the Epstein files locked up through the legal means that I mentioned, and primarily to flood the zone with narratives and talking points to take the heat off of himself in any way possible. The battlefield in the coming days will be over who is able to establish their narrative in the minds of the average American. This is where content creators like me and where viewers like you come in. We have to work together to take advantage of this moment as much as possible to advance the narrative that Trump and Republicans spend this much effort to protect a pederast, and public discourse will be the arena where we make that happen. I want us on the left to be able to make it undeniable how far the right has gone to protect Donald Trump from his Epstein connections, to tarnish their brand and to make it so that the average American immediately links Trump and the right and Epstein together. And we need to dismantle the counter-narratives that the right will use to protect Trump and themselves. Okay, but I can hear you asking. I said that I was giving you the good news. How is this the good news? See, this is good news because when it comes to this specific issue, this has been where the right has been failing hard every time they try to make a talking point work. A personal favorite of mine is when Speaker Mike Johnson defended Trump by saying that he was actually an FBI informant working undercover to take Epstein down.
He's not saying that what Epstein did is a hoax. It's a terrible, unspeakable evil. He believes that himself. When he first heard the rumor, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. He was an FBI informant to try to take this stuff down.
Once you think about this talking point for more than 5 seconds and understand what Johnson was implying about Trump, it only makes Trump look even worse, even if you buy what he's saying. So that defense obviously didn't work out, but trust me, it really doesn't get much better than that. Here are some other talking points they might try. One of the ways that I think the right might try to defend Trump from this story is by rehabilitating Jeffrey Epstein's image and trying to convince people that Epstein was actually a good guy, persecuted by the deep state and the woke mob. Now, that sounds like I'm joking. I can't be serious, right? Well, actually, in the documents that Congress released just before the big vote, it was revealed that in the year before Epstein was arrested for the final time, None other than Steve Bannon was regularly talking with Epstein. They were discussing the increasing media scrutiny on Epstein's past and his relationship to Trump, and Bannon was actively planning on how to help Epstein rehabilitate his image. And it was also revealed that Bannon was actively planning to make a documentary film for this purpose, and he had already shot the initial footage for this film and sent it for Epstein to review. Another unidentified person told Epstein not to worry, that they were just trying to take down Trump any way they could, that this would all blow over soon. So yeah, when I say that the right might try to defend Trump by rehabilitating Epstein's image, I'm not joking. This is already something that they tried to do. Another angle that they might try is to normalize or lessen Epstein's crimes by drawing lines between crimes against children and crimes against girls who are merely under 18. We've already seen at least one right-wing talking head try this, when Megyn Kelly said this on her show.
I've said this before, but just as a reminder, I do know somebody very, very close to this case who is in a position to know that Jeffrey Epstein, in this person's view, was not a pedophile. This is this person's view, who was there for a lot of this, but that he was into the barely legal type. Like he liked 15-year-old girls. And I realize this is disgusting. I'm definitely not trying to make an excuse for this. I'm just giving you facts. We have yet to see anybody come forward and say, I was I was under 10, I was under 14. You can say that's a distinction without a difference.
No, it's not.
I think there is a difference. Yeah. There's a difference between a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old. Yeah. You know, it's just whatever. It's sick.
So I bring up those two examples mostly for historical purposes. The truth is that I don't think that the right is going to stick with these two lines going forward. What I believe is going to be their main tactic going forward is exactly what was implied with their new active investigation. What Trump and his administration are going to do is use the fact that they are in possession of the files to shape the narrative. They already set the stage for this by announcing that the new investigation is focused on Democrat or Democrat-aligned people. It's obvious that they're going to hold back any files that implicate Trump or tie him to Epstein in any way, and in the meantime, they're going to publish any and all files that they have that implicate Democrats in any way. They're going to flood the zone with as many headlines as they can that tie Democrats to Epstein. Expect many press releases where Pam Bondi stands in front of the press to announce new revelations where this or that Democrat is associated with Jeffrey Epstein, all while the files that tie Trump to Epstein are all conveniently tied up in the active investigation. They're basically going to delay and buy themselves time with their active investigation, and in the meantime, they're going to keep throwing out red meat to the media and their base, hoping and praying that some headline, some association is juicy enough for their base to pick it up, adopt it as their official narrative, and forget all about Trump. The Trump administration is basically betting on their very advanced media ecosystem to take the materials they throw out and spin up a narrative to make it all work. And honestly, out of all their options, I think this is their best one. Trump and his administration have very good reasons to think that their voter base will happily eat up any line they're fed. And even if the Trump administration doesn't come up with anything good enough, their voter base will come up with something on their own. After all, this is how he got elected. But I have good news here too. I don't think that any of this is going to work. I mean, they might have limited success generating some media buzz around some of the Democrats in the files, but nothing is going to make this story go away for Trump. Now, I need to be absolutely clear about something. The reason why none of the tactics that I listed here will work has nothing to do with their flaws as arguments. You must understand that the majority of Trump's base can and will get themselves to believe that Epstein was just misunderstood or to defend attraction to minors as completely normal if they think that these lines can preserve their belief in Trump and own the libs. But the first reason why these tactics won't work is because the right-wing's media ecosystem has already made Epstein a villain with their own audiences. Normally, the right can rely on their media ecosystem to unify around propagating the talking point of the day and keep out any information that would challenge their worldviews. But with this case, right-wing media has already been fixating on Epstein for years. Epstein's life and his crimes are just so naturally attention-grabbing that right-wing media couldn't help but cover him as much as possible, especially when they could cast Epstein as an avatar of the depraved Democratic deep state and Trump as the hero who's going to drain the swamp and expose all the corruption. Right-wing media can't just wait this story out. They can't just work together to keep their audiences from caring about it because they are the ones that already made their audiences care about it. Trump himself promised that he would release the Epstein Files as he was running in 2024, and his base loved him all the more for it. But when Trump and his administration suddenly reversed their positions, when Trump suddenly didn't want to release the Epstein files or even talk about them anymore, when Pam Bondi went from bragging that she had the Epstein client list on her desk to saying that it didn't exist, Trump suddenly put right-wing media in an impossible position. They had just spent years building up their anti-establishment cred with their Epstein coverage. My guess is that most of them will simply stop talking about the story, like Charlie Kirk did after getting a call from Trump. They'll go quiet and hope that some story comes out so they can put the attention back on the Democrats. But there's another reason why these lines won't work, and it's actually because of Trump himself. I believe that Trump has fatally mismanaged this issue based on the only thing that his voters actually care about: vibes. Let me explain. First, you need to understand that most Trump supporters do not support Trump because of any one policy or anything concrete like that. They support Trump because of his vibes. During the election, people I knew were completely confused at how Trump could say things like, "They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats," or things like, "I have concepts of a plan," and still go out and vote for him over the other person. What they don't realize is that Trump and his supporters don't listen to Trump the same way as the rest of us. They're not listening for the content of his words, they're listening to how he says those words. There are numerous examples of how when you take what Trump says and write it out as text, it's completely incoherent. But that doesn't matter to Trump's supporters, because Trump's appeal for them is in his cadence, his confidence and demeanor. Up to this point, Trump has never spoken publicly without projecting total and absolute confidence at all times. During his election speeches, it wasn't his policies that mattered, it's the tone and posture of being outraged, charged up and ready to fight and smash the establishment. Whenever he gets a question from a reporter, it doesn't matter whether or not his answer makes sense. It matters that he always responds like he has complete knowledge of the situation, and with aggression towards the establishment reporter. This is why Trump's supporters think that he's a great leader and love him so much. Trump's lack of doubt and total conviction in everything he says gives his followers permission to have total faith and adoration in him. Believing in Trump and his ability to do and fix anything is what alleviates their existential anxieties. It is their antidote to the world's uncertainty. To give up belief in Trump is to let go of their psychological safety blanket. But what makes the Epstein issue unique is that Trump has been responding with something unusual from him, with fear and defensiveness. In the days leading up to the vote in Congress, Trump had two weird moments when he was pressed by reporters about the files. The first one went like this. Now, some of you might think that this is just normal for Trump, but this is actually quite different from the way he normally acts. When Trump snapped back at reporters before, his fan base liked it because he would do it while maintaining his posture of being above the attack, of being so above the questioner that the person in their criticism was almost like a joke to him. And seeing this performance of dominance reinforces the image of Trump that his followers want to see. But this was just weird. First of all, Trump didn't even try to hand-wave the question away. He just went straight into attack mode with an insult that wasn't clever at all. And because the reporter he was insulting wasn't even overweight, calling her piggy doesn't even register as being mean. It's just weird. It signals that Trump was stressed and just went for the first insult on his mind. Second, just look at his body language. This is not what being above it looks like. Maybe Trump was trying to appear dominant, but even a Trump supporter recognizes that this signals real emotional investment in defensiveness. Then there's this moment from a joint appearance with the Saudi prince, which pretty much happened at the same time as the vote was happening in Congress.
Why wait for Congress to release the Epstein files? Why not just do it now?
You know, it's not the question that I mind, it's your attitude. I think you are a terrible reporter. It's the way you ask these questions. You start off with a man who's highly respected, asking him a horrible, insubordinate, and just a terrible question. And you could even ask that same exact question nicely. You're all psyched up. Somebody psychs you over at ABC. They're going to psych. You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter.
This one is just pathetic. The right wing has made facts don't care about your feelings their brand for so long, and now they're watching their president literally say, "It's not what you said, it's how you said it."
Now I've upset you? What did I say?
Not what you said, it's just the way you said it.
Oh my God! I'm a woman!
This is Trump's final mistake. Trump has been nervous and rattled every time he's tried to answer questions about Epstein, and his fan base picks up on this. If Trump had only been able to bluff his way through this and maintain his usual demeanor, I honestly think that he'd be fine right now, and that his base would be ready to swallow up any talking point that he comes up with. But because he showed weakness, he's betrayed the contract between him and his followers, where if they give Trump their loyalty, he'll give them certainty. And that is not going to go away easily. So that leaves the question, what should we on the left do about this? Well, I'm happy to say that in this case, I think the left, and honestly some of the mainstream media, has already been doing the right thing, and we just need to keep doing more of it. So to help with that, let me describe the project out loud and in detail to make it clear. First, we need to keep hammering the Trump administration's contradictions on this. Keep saying and posting wherever you spend your time the facts that Trump ran on releasing the Epstein files, then opposed releasing them right up until the vote. Keep saying that Pam Bondi bragged that she had the client list on her desk, and then her DOJ said the client list doesn't exist. Keep reminding everyone that people like libs of TikTok bragged about how Trump was releasing the Epstein files months earlier and are silent now. Remind everyone about how Trump told Republicans to vote against releasing the files and flip-flopped only just before the vote. It's not important that everyone is able to memorize every detail and date. It's important that people just have the general sense that the Trump administration and the right is all over the place on this issue. It destroys their credibility, and it makes it that much harder for whatever talking point they come up with to catch on. Next, we need to make this stick to the entire GOP, not just Trump. The recent fractures in the Republican Party over the Epstein files are fun to watch, but they're also the first signs of right-wing figures positioning themselves for a post-Trump environment. If and when this scandal takes Trump down, we cannot allow the rest of the Republicans to pretend like they had nothing to do with this. It needs to be pointed out just how disgusting it is that Republican leadership has unified and put so much effort into helping Trump hide what's in the Epstein files. Almost nothing about the Republicans surprises me these days, but the fact that Speaker Mike Johnson, who loves talking about how Christian and moral he is, spent months pulling strings and bending the rules just to prevent a vote on releasing the Epstein files, that Pam Bondi is opening up a new investigation as a highly deliberate and multi-part strategy to hide Trump's name, this is just truly disgusting, and we need to make all of this well known. We need people to instinctively associate the Republican Party with the protection of sex traffickers, and all we have to do is tell people the truth. We might not get justice in the traditional sense, but this absolutely can bury Trump. Trump is falling apart when it comes to this story, and the more that we pile on the questions and attention to this, the more Trump is going to look weak. When Trump is visibly no longer able to control the Republican Party, no longer being able to go through a press meeting without being pestered about the Epstein files, he will look weak. And that is what is going to break the spell for many of his supporters. So I want to close this video with some thoughts about what we can expect going forward. First, I am legitimately worried that this pressure on Trump might make him create a crisis as a distraction from the Epstein story. It is not hard to imagine Trump escalating a foreign conflict just to create new news cycles and help the right unify behind new talking points. And again, I use the word might, but in reality, this is already happening as I am recording this video. In the week after the Epstein vote, the US military has been sending warships and fighter jets to Venezuela. The FAA has sent out a warning to airlines due to increased military activity around the country. And just the day after the vote happened, Trump said that he was not ruling out military action against Venezuela, and the day before the vote, Trump also said that he was open to military strikes in Mexico. The point is, don't be surprised if we start seeing real chaos soon, and it will probably succeed in creating news cycles that push the Epstein story away for a while, but not forever. Remember, the Epstein story survived Charlie Kirk, despite his best efforts. Another thing that I think we should be worried about that I don't see enough people talking about is the current MAGA civil war that is happening over the Epstein files. Marjorie Taylor Greene has already announced that she will be retiring from Congress at the end of her current term, but I only take this as a sign that she's just going to become a full-time content creator, which is the actual thing that she's been passionate about this whole time. What I'm worried about is that some liberals in the media will latch onto this group of MAGA defectors and try to spin the story that some people on the right have finally grown a moral spine, or that the movement is moderating in some way, and that they will be too eager to forgive and forget for the Republicans that start to use the Epstein story as a reason to come out against Trump. Like I said before, Do not be tricked into thinking that the MAGA movement is moderating or that them breaking from Trump here is due to some moral principle. What we are seeing here is the next wave of right-wing populists positioning themselves for a post-Trump politics, and we cannot let these Republicans get away with this rebrand. Mark my words, today it's MTG and Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz, but more of them will come out as time passes, and we cannot let the media whitewash them and celebrate them for their bravery. We need to remember that they were for everything else that Trump did all this time. The authoritarianism, the corruption, the politics of cruelty, everything. I do think that there will be a large faction of people who stay loyal to Trump until the end, who will turn a blind eye to this Epstein stuff, but the next wave of right-wing populism will use the Epstein story as a wedge to distinguish themselves and their brands. And my concern is that future Republicans will let Epstein become the one acknowledged fault of Trump, that they'll stand up there and roll up all the problems of the Trump era with Trump's failures with the Epstein Files, pretending like they represent something new while they were actively for everything else that made Trump horrible. This is obviously a much larger topic for another video, but I wanted to touch on this point here to keep it in mind. So in conclusion, no, we're not going to actually see the Epstein Files anytime soon, and Trump's administration is not going down without a fight. But it might not matter. And Trump's delay tactics might not be enough to really save him this time around. Old Teflon Don isn't so slick anymore, and this story has the power to stick around for a lot longer, as long as we don't let it die, and as long as we're at least a little bit prepared for what's coming next. So thanks so much for watching this video. If you found it interesting or helpful, please make sure to like and subscribe. And I'd also love to hear what you think of all this in the comments below. I do read them. And now a big shout out and thank you to my current patrons. Finite Difference, Posty, Frank Moraes, Yug Haj, Tasty3141, Streeter Sweeper, Nixon Checkers, Reese Iyer, Christian Nygaard, Sina, David Lamb. Thank you all so much. And if you, the viewer, really like what I do and would like to help me do it full time, please consider checking out my Patreon, linked in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.